good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful Friday night for another fantastic month of design event. This evening, we're going to be talking about City Modern and all aspects of the City Modern project. We have a lot of panelists here tonight to speak about the project, their role in the project, their passion for this project, and they're all here this evening. But first, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Melissa Ditmer. I'm the Chief Design Officer at Bedrock. I have been in the family of companies for 7 years. This project, the City Modern project, was a project I started working on 5 years ago. So this project is one of the first real estate projects that I worked on at Bedrock. And so it is near and dear to my heart. Next slide, please. So before we get into the evening, I want everyone to celebrate City Modern. Make yourself an evening muse cocktail, and cheers to everyone for joining us to talk about design on a Friday night. While you're making yourself a drink, let me tell you a little bit about some Zoom logistics that will make this evening super fantastic and successful for everyone. So when you entered this Zoom meeting, you were automatically placed on mute with your video off. So feel free to comment to those around you about how fantastic this is, about the exciting facts that you've learned, and we won't be able to hear you or see you. If you do have a question that you'd like to ask the panelists, we will have a Q&A session towards the end of the event, but throughout the evening, feel free to submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A box found in the controls panel at the bottom of the window, and we will do our best to answer all the questions by the end of the event. And finally, if you're on your desktop computer, for the best viewing experience, please go to Viewing Preferences at the top of your screen and select Original Format, and that will allow you to view the entire screen. So grab your drink, we'll move to the next slide. And let's talk about City Modern. So City Modern is a project that Bedrock started about 5 years ago, as I said. It started with a city-issued RFP, or request for proposal, for 8.4 acres in the historic Brush Park neighborhood. And you can see those 8.4 acres equals about 1.5 city blocks within Brush Park. Next slide, please. So the 8.4 acres had 4 existing historic homes, Victorian historic homes on them. But the historic Brush Park neighborhood is a well-known historic district within Brush Park that at one point had over 100 Victorian homes in it. It's now down to about 40 Victorian homes. And it was important for us as we were thinking about how to design and construct new buildings within that neighborhood to ask the question, what does it mean to design new buildings within a historic district? Next slide, please. And so when Bedrock was answering the RFP, we looked at everything. We looked at what it means to design historic buildings within the Secretary of Interior standards. The work shall be different from the old, but shall be compatible with the historic buildings in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. We did additional research and looked at what that meant in order to do new buildings that were either fully contextual with the buildings around it, abstractly contextual, or anti-contextual. That ranges from everything from mimicking the historic all the way to doing something that was so unlike the historic and anywhere in between. Next slide, please. We also looked at the Brush Park Historic District. They had spent a lot of time putting together a really thoughtful document that outlined the 18 elements of design for architecture and for new buildings to be put into the historic district. Next slide, please. And so for us, for Bedrock, with one of our very first new construction development projects, we had to think about what does it mean to design new buildings within historic district in Detroit in 2016. Next slide. And so we looked at the timelines of historic Brush Park. We looked at when the buildings were built, when the buildings were divided up into smaller buildings, the storied history of some of the demolitions of those historic buildings, but we also looked at Detroit and the significance of design within the city of Detroit over the past 100 years, running in tandem with Brush Park's timeline. Next slide, please. And then we realized we were at a moment. It says we are here, but that's actually, we are here in 2016. So that's almost 5 years ago now. And we realized we needed to both honor the historic significance of Brush Park. Next slide. While also honoring what design means to Detroit. So our project approach celebrates Brush Park's past while designing contemporary architecture emblematic of Detroit's time. Next slide. So we spent, with that approach, we realized that we needed to hire the best master planners. So we hired Hamilton Anderson, a local architecture firm, who is represented here tonight, and Betsy Williams is going to speak about their work on this project. We designed, or we knew we were going to have 5 different typologies within the project, so we looked for the 5 best designers, some of which are here tonight, to talk about their projects. And it was important that we found designers who had done similar work, where they were designing new contemporary architecture within historic districts. Next slide. And so we worked with all 5 of those architecture firms, and we came up with what you see before you, which is for me, a blurry architectural rendering of what we thought was going to be the vision for bringing this contemporary architecture that was respectful of Brush Park's past. Next slide. And so here you can see was the existing conditions of these 8.4 acres with the 4 historic homes that were abandoned and mothballed when we received the land. Next slide. And then here we are, hopefully in a crisper photo of the construction being done on Brush Park City Modern project today. Next slide. So this is a video, I believe. So that gives you a real-time look at the construction efforts of our project out at City Modern. And tonight we're going to focus in on an explanation of the planning process that we went through, and also 3 buildings that are currently under construction or about to open or have opened in the City Modern project. If you go to the next slide. And so we also have community aspect here with one of our near and dear friends, Mona Ross Gardner. She is the chair of Brush Park Community Development. She's going to talk about the community engagement aspect of our City Modern project over the past 4 years. Next slide. We also have Maurice Cox. We truly miss him in Detroit. He used to be our director of planning and development at the City of Detroit, has now moved on to do great things in Chicago, but was instrumental in getting this project off the ground and almost fully constructed. Next slide. We also have Betsy Williams, Director of Design from Hamilton Anderson Associates, and she's going to speak about one of the projects and one of the buildings here within the City Modern development. Next slide. And then we have Lorkhan O'Hara, who's joining us from California today. Lorkhan and his firm, Loha, designed 4 of the apartment buildings within the City Modern project. Next slide. And then we have Andrew Bodley, a former associate at Hamilton Anderson, who was instrumental in designing one of the buildings there and now works at Bedrock as a senior project designer. Next slide. So these are all your panelists. I'm going to now exit stage left and bring forward our first speaker, which is Mona Ross Gardner. Mona, take it away.
Hi there, how's everyone? Thank you so much for having me. My name is Mona Ross Gardner. I'm a resident and business owner in Brush Park for over 30 years. I have restored several homes in Brush Park, including the Winder Street Inn, which is a fetching bed and breakfast, and the Brush Park Bar and Grill, which is a Louisiana cuisine restaurant. I have worked with Brush Park and their residents for the last 15 years, trying to put together a plan to revise our modification for Brush Park so that we could bring in additional development because the density for the requirements needed to be changed. So I'm going to give you a little history about the CDC, which is the Brush Park Community Development Corporation. We provide neighborhood continuous support of the Brush Park Community Development Corporation, formerly the CDC, which was disbanded in around 2010, reformed the Citizens Brush Park Community Development Corporation in December of 2014 as a nonprofit. The CDC defines the Brush Park neighborhood as being bounded by Mack Avenue to Woodward Avenue to the west. Our board reflects various stakeholders in the neighborhood, including residents, owners, and renters, business owners, and development partners. The listing that you have is myself, President, Carissa Holmes, Vice President, Alex, who is a urban designer, Warren McBride, a professor, Michael Eason, who is actually a developer, Nathan Anderson, a counselor, Clifford Brown, another developer, Jeff Cohen, another developer, and Donovan Darius, who is actually an agent for the government. So we have a quite diverse board, and what we do is we reflect our community in regards to the meeting. Next. The CDC dedicated the growth of the development of Brush Park neighborhood. We as advocates for preservation of the historical value of the structures in our community. We provide an avenue for residents' feedback on development projects within our neighborhood and an opportunity for developers to directly engage with members of the community. We then provide feedback and recommendations to the city concerning new developments and other matters that impact our neighborhood. The CDC has held community meetings to overview over 30 neighborhood projects since 2015. In addition to advocating for development, the Alliance with the vision of our residents, the CDC has undertaken initiatives to improve the quality of our lives for our neighbors, such as beautification, residential permit parking, updates, parks, and so on. Next, please. When we started looking for another avenue of development for our community, we discovered that the density for Brush Park would only allow for 15 to 35 dwellings per square acre. And we decided to approach the city along with Sue Mosley in Midtown, who assisted us with this project, to see that if we could find some development and change the modification plan to increase the density per acre to at least 60. I was actually allowed to sit on a panel when the city put out an RFP to find a developer for the project for Brush Park. That's when I actually met Bedrock and this young, interesting group of talented architects came marching in, and although there were 9 different groups that we had to choose from, they just stood out. And I'm so proud that I was part of that project to help to bring them into our community, because we've had nothing but success. We have sat down and became friends. We've met, they've been at all of our meetings, they've listened to our concerns, they looked at what we like to see in our community, and by golly, it's happening. It's actually happening. So I want to thank Bedrock for that. Next. So the shared project vision, the project ends up with a debut in Detroit on City Modern, and we'd like to be part of the success and the process, as we have been from start to finish. So next. So you can learn more about the Brush Park CDC by visiting our website, www.brushparkcdc.org. The CDC generally meets bi-monthly, so you can visit our website for updates, or you can reach out to us at hello-brushparkcdc.org. I really do thank the panel for putting this together and allowing the community input into it. They worked very closely with us throughout this whole process. We have been informed of every aspect. We've been invited to all the meetings and been able to participate as they have with us. And so I just want to thank you from the Brush Park community and the Brush Park CDC.
Well, Mona, I want to thank you for taking us into your home, which you did by inviting us over for meetings in your inn, but also just accepting us into your community. We know as a developer that this community already existed, that the people already lived here and had a strong voice, and we just want to make sure that we are good neighbors and long-term stakeholders as we go into the future. So next I want to turn it over to Maurice Cox. Like I said, Maurice used to be the director of planning here in Detroit. This project would not have worked without him being in our city during this time. We continue to share secrets about how to do these types of projects, even though he's in Chicago. So Maurice, take it from here.
Excellent. So thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Mona. I miss you all. I miss the D. But I think Melissa reminded us that we were all kind of new in our role. I came to Detroit in 2015 in February. Already in March, that I was asked to oversee the selection for the first RFP that the city was to release for a comprehensive block and a half of Brush Park. This is a neighborhood where over 60% of the land is publicly owned. So this was going to be a precedent. We understood that from the very beginning. And as was mentioned, we reviewed 9 different proposals that were under consideration, but there really was only one that attempted to do what City Modern has done. And that is to blend the past by using very traditional neighborhood patterns of development with the present, which is a realistic image of a neighborhood that by necessity will be built over a long period of time. And I would say the future, by creating an architecture that has its eye kind of clearly on the future and captures the spirit of innovation that only the future has. And you can see it from this single image. The next slide. The other issue was, how do you build a gentle density beyond the single family tradition that Detroit is known for, and not have the neighborhood populated by high-rise typologies that often scoop up all of the residential power that would otherwise animate the street life. So we were in search for the missing middle, those mid-rise buildings, stacked townhouses, carriage houses that could genuinely build the neighborhood over time. Next slide. And then, how do you do that where you set out a set of guideline instructions for a variety of architects to come in and design singular buildings. So it already introduced the idea of a code of sorts that would be creatively interpreted by a variety of architects in this block and a half. The next. And here was a really fascinating thing. There are only 2,900 plus residents today, but we were envisioning what a quarter square mile of Brush Park might look like well into the future. And what happens when you invest in a transit system that is literally 5 minutes away from this neighborhood? And does that give it an opportunity to be a transit-oriented development, just like that? And could you conceive of a neighborhood where you would be able to walk within 20 minutes and access all of the amenities that you needed in your daily life, from walking to work, to walking to the corner store, to riding your bike along a greenway, so forth and so on. So the 20-minute neighborhood, my conception of it was born through this City Modern project. Next slide. And here was the other thing. Could we design a neighborhood that was socially, economically, and environmentally integrated, that would be attractive for young families with children, young singles, elderly, and young professionals? Could we really create a mix of units and types that would attract this broadest cross-section of demographics? Next. And could we build a neighborhood that wasn't dominated by parking lots, but instead allowed the buildings to have a relationship with the street? So you have that traditional eyes on the street, you create porch life, you create balcony life where residents can literally lean over and see who's ringing their doorbell. So this attention to the quality and the life of the street was a foundational framework. Next. And I think, as Mona mentioned, the engagement was continual, and it was the anchor for the success that we see today. And I'm not talking about, some obligated, public hearing, touch bases once a month. This was a deep engagement and in continual means of feedback from the design, from the form, from the typology. And so I think it is a lesson to developers that if you want to design a community that feels like the community, then you will have to engage in a deep process. And that actually could not have been done without the CDC having already firmly been in place, having already firmly put out a vision for what they wanted to see, that gentle density that Mona talked about. Next. And then, how do you create a cross-section of types? And where would you put appropriate mid-rise density? The decision to orient them north-south and reserve the smaller scale development to the east-west streets is something that is fundamental to the success of Brush Park. I'm pretty confident that all of you have stood between these 6-story buildings and looked at how they frame the downtown high-rises, and you have an instant sense of urbanity and variety. And next, and then this notion of the corner store. Could we cluster just the right amount of retail on the corner, the way retail has traditionally nestled itself into predominantly residential neighborhoods that, again, animates the street life, creates this 20-minute neighborhood where you can get your amenities within the neighborhood you live. Next. And this notion of an alley, but not just an alley for cars, an alley for people. Could you create a place, which is an alternative place, that gives those who live there a sense of security, a place where kids could play, you can hang out and talk to your neighbor over balconies, so that it genuinely becomes a pedestrian street that occasionally has cars tucked in under the units. Next. And this one was a really important innovation. This notion of how do you create a collective space within a hermetic block? Because traditionally, you don't invite the public into the interior of the block, but this notion of creating a greenway that breaks the block, splits it open, and invites the public to traverse it and creates even more eyes on the street, introduces that environmental issue that takes us beyond the idea of a street with street trees, and to literally create a collective space for all residents, but to invite residents from outside of the neighborhood in as well. And next slide. And when I see this image, I just feel warmed that this is a city block. And it speaks very specifically to that component of space, which is unique to Detroit, that we actually have the space to spread out so that these kind of green amenities could be a part of the block life of a neighborhood. Next. And then the diagram that really sold the committee on this plan, the idea that we could build a neighborhood that was typologically based, that would have a variety of options for how to live in an urban neighborhood. And so we were always impressed that there were 6 different options for how to live on this block and a half. And these 18 or so buildings with 5 different architects authoring the designs truly begins to imagine what a modern neighborhood over time can look like. And we used this study of typology to imagine the entire neighborhood of Brush Park. Next. And so what you see in this last version is a series of publicly released RFPs for the vast majority of land that is owned by the city, that maps out what thousands of units of housing might look like. And I am pleased that after a year and a half, 2.5 years, the City Council adopted Detroit's first form-based code right there in Brush Park. And I would argue that City Modern was our pilot that gave birth to an entire 20-minute neighborhood. So I really thank the team for it. And I know, as you know, we now can see the future, and it is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. We agree that the future for Brush Park does look amazing. If you think about thousands of new units, that means that each of those units is occupied by at least one person, if not multiple people, and all sharing their stories within the same neighborhood, which is pretty powerful. So next up, we are going to have Betsy Williams speak about and let us know about the really thoughtful and engaging design process that they used for 124 Alfred. Betsy, take it away for here.
Thank you, Melissa, and hello, everyone. Hamilton Anderson is so happy to have had this opportunity to work on an affordable senior housing project, helping Bedrock realize their vision for this. I think we can all agree this is an urgent need, and we need to do more of it. So we loved working on it, and I'm excited to share it. So you can see where it's located. It's in the southwestern quadrant of this development. Let's go next. And now we're going to reorient you and look south so you can get a sense of what the proximity to the city, the strategic location that this building has along a major thoroughfare of north-south John R, east-west Alfred, Alfred being a more residential street that we have some responses to, which we'll explain next. But first, let's do a couple of facts. 5 stories, 81,000 square feet, 54 units. A key tenet to this as a senior housing project is actually to provide active and engaged living opportunities for people that are 55 and up. And so that actually means, you know, connecting with the neighborhood at large, as Maurice has described, connecting with the amenities within the development, but then also within the context of the building, forming connections, allowing people to have community space, but also these places in between, you know, the corridors, the stoops, the balconies where people can be part of a community. We also followed the Enterprise Green criteria, which allowed us to do a number of interesting things, among them work on cardiovascular health through how people use the building, and work with Bedrock to make sure that the building is sustained or managed and operated in a sustainable way, including down to what kind of cleaning supplies you use in the building. Next, please. Because it is affordable, we also had to make it a project that we could build under the budget that was required of it. And so we set about to have a fairly simple project, an L-shaped building that wraps a corner, a simple skin with a not expensive material that's well detailed, coupled with the balconies that Maurice was referring to. The balconies became kind of the key design feature of this project. They're inset, so they're part of the unit, and they provide rhythm and scale, of course, to the project, but more importantly, they strengthen the engagement between that person's unit and how they engage with the street. We also looked at the context of the historic buildings and also the context of the other architects and their work, because that is the new context that was being formed, which we can look at a little more next. Here's just an overall view of that corner scaled in a little bit. Again, we're at John R and Alfred. We have retail at the corner, which again speaks to some of the tenets of the project. And we also have some strategic decisions like an entry on Alfred Street, the little number 1, because that's the residential street, that's where this residence should be entered. Next, please. A little more detail about Alfred Street, because this is a very key part of the project. As we wrap that corner, you can see how the building is taller and then it begins to step down and relate very much more to the residential houses, historic ones, particularly the one right adjacent to it on the right. This came about because of, you know, some good thinking and talking, but also working very hard with the actual neighbors and neighbor who were next door to this site, and then just the nature of the history of the street and how buildings sit back on those residential streets. And then within that space of that setback, we were able to provide front steps and gardens, essentially stoops, to those walk-up units that actually are a part of the whole apartment building, but they have this distinct and special advantage of being right on the street. Again, connecting even more to the neighborhood that we're speaking of, and so excited about. Next, please. So I'll just quickly go through some of the program, and you can kind of see them on the side. The reception is obviously right there when you walk through the door. It's very open, accessible. The offices are right there, so people can make connections with what they need here in this building. Retail is on the corner, and again, that contributes a lot to the activation of this whole community, but also very convenient to our residents here. Next slide, please. And then there is kind of an overall strategy, as I mentioned, an L-shaped building with retail on the major thoroughfare. This L is wrapping a parking court, essentially parking below deck, below grade, also some tuck under parking. And that wrapper also contains those residential units that form almost townhomes on the street. All of this is softened by a garden in the parking area to soften it, but also provide healthy opportunities and communal opportunities for the residents here. Next slide, please. I mentioned that typical unit that's on the ground floor facing Alfred Street. That's really the workhorse unit of this building. There are a few special units, but primarily it's a 1-bedroom unit, and primarily they stack as you would typically do in most projects. What we tried to do here in one place at the break point between floors 3 and 4, we did flip just 2 units. And by doing that, as the diagram shows, you start to get a rhythm and a syncopation that isn't usually possible. So with this subtle little move, we feel like we achieved a lot of the rhythm and joy of the project that we were aiming to achieve on a budget. Let's go, next slide, please. I'm just going to quickly show you a couple pictures of the model unit. This is a model unit that was staged, and obviously everyone's unit's going to look different than this, but this is how it all began. This is a unit on the corner on the 5th floor. Let's go to the next slide so we can see some of the views of that unit. Wide open space, long and narrow, but well lit, of course, views of the city. Next slide, please. And then amenities that you would hope to find that allow people to live independently and actively, their own washer and dryer, accessible bathrooms, and just simple, well-lit rooms in a palette that's purposefully neutral, so that when people move and make this their home, their belongings become the decor of the place. And that was something we were striving for. Next slide, please. And then the top floor also has the kind of bulk of the community shared activities, an exercise space, an indoor community room, a great deck where you can see north, west, and south, fireworks, everything. And again, this 5th floor, because it's masked only on John R., that allows us to have that kind of tall piece that then steps down and gives way to the opportunity for that deck. And next slide. Just really quickly, we've made it to the top. There's our building one more time. And if we go to the slide one after this, I just want to say one quick word about something that we enjoyed in our office, which was the acceptance that we would use an all-in-one Magic Pack unit to heat the units. That's an affordable thing to do. We were committed to making sure that that became not a problem, but an aspect of the exterior. So we worked very hard on the screening, did a lot of testing to see the best screen option possible, and then applied that with other details to the facade. The mantra we had in our office at that time was magic happens. Next slide, please. And then here's our final view of this project. This is speaking to something that we're hoping the building continues to grow toward, which is the occupation of those balconies, how people use them, how they commute across them, and above and below them. I think the one balcony in the middle, you can kind of see that, how there's a balcony within a balcony, so those people almost share the same porch vertically, which we think is kind of fun. So that's the story for now. I look forward to your questions, and let's talk about the building to the right.
Thank you, Betsy. I just can't thank you enough, you and Hamilton Anderson, for your passion on this project, proving that affordable housing and senior housing can be beautiful and also sustainable. Betsy was the sustainability champion for this project, proving that you can have all of it, and that is proven by the current occupancy rate, which is almost full. The building is almost full. So all great things came together. Our next panelist is Lorkhan O'Hara. He is coming to us from a beautiful California afternoon, all the way from the West Coast, where he's the head of and founder of his firm, Lorkhan O'Hara Architects. Lorkhan, do you want to tell us about 2660 John R., please?
It'd be a pleasure. Hopefully you can all hear us. Great pleasure to be invited to be part of this wonderful experience. We did see this project as an opportunity to further expand the idea that can a building be more than simply a building? Can it be woven into the city life that it's placed? And that's key to quite a bit of our work. We drive all our work based on engaging the community and the culture where it is. So we imagine that this new complex could allow life to spill into the streets and infuse a neighborhood with life and activity and energy and dynamics. Cities have to have that to in a way become robust, and that's something very important to us. But the project I will be discussing, as Melissa just mentioned, is John R. 2660, corner of Alfred and John R. Street. Next. As a whole, the quartet of anchor buildings we were asked to design are variations of a single idea, meant to reflect the low, strong character of the neighborhood. They are designed to add density while valuing the neighborhood architectural past, meaning that the scale and density and proportions of what's around it plays a big role in terms of how we place these projects in the city. It was key to look at the adjacencies and to connect within the scale and proportions of the building. Not only proportions of the building, proportions of windows, proportions of all the other aspects of it. In terms of the step massing was key to these projects. So that would allows the building to be more inclusive in a sense, and that's very exciting, and responding to, of course, the existing neighborhood. We took the approach of step massing, so we reduced the scale of the building, so it's aligned with smaller adjacencies, including the Victorian house across the street from the particular project I'm referring to. Each building steps down to the central area and aligns with the townhouses and historical Victorian buildings as well. So that was very important. The big idea was, how do you get away from the 5-story continuous volume, but actually step down so you can activate the different outdoor decks to the street as well. In a way, think of it a vertical garden, a vertical stepping, which is crucial. The materiality of each building is unique and consistent with locally sourced materials. That's very important. So we are looking at the Detroit urban palette as a driver through what kind we clad these buildings. It was we worked with brick, wood, and metal, a couple of one of the signature materials in each building. So one was brick, metal, and wood, which is crucial. Next. This image shows the step massing, the balconies, and unique material palette. That was also key to the whole project. Very exciting for me was how we juxtaposed the horizontal by orienting the wood vertically. So you have the horizontal and then you have the vertical. So the horizontal being the kind of coping you can see on each floor plate. The verticality of the actual cedar was also crucial. So it has a tactility material to it. You want to touch it, it feels different, and that was crucial to it. The wooden pieces bring texture. We're playing with also the horizontal aspects of it, which is very interesting because sometimes buildings tend to be the same material all 5 levels. We wanted to break the massing on that down. So next slide. Here are more details of the building showing its context, which is crucial. These buildings are part of the city, part of the context, part of Brush Park. And how it stitches into the neighborhood is what drives all of our work. You can see the proportions of the buildings. It becomes a scalar issue, which was very important to us. The townhouses and the senior housing are all balanced on either side. So the building in a way becomes this kind of mitigating factor between both those buildings. Next. And here you have a video. I'll just talk briefly through it, but you'll see proportions, the wood, the glass components of it. There are 34 units. Total square footage is around 48,000 square feet. There's a mix of units from studios, from 9 studios to 1 bedrooms. There's 10 2-bedrooms. The range of size is around 513 square feet. At the low end and 1,160 at the high, with the average around 750 square feet. So you can see here the access, you can see the deck here. So it's activated decks. Kitchen, also the flush window conditions, floor to ceiling. Brings a really nice light into the spaces, and it's very welcoming. You want to be in this space. You can see also the street level, you can envision that the sidewalks will be activated. Very, very important. Next. Here you can see the nature of the wood and the cedar. Again, the tactile quality is very important. We do believe materials do want to be touched, that it's something that you can change people's perception of buildings. It is very interesting to think of this as a living organism. Next. Here you can see the retail canopy. We created this canopy so that you have some shade and protection as you're walking on the sidewalk. In this view, you can see how the building folds in to create a generous space on the street. We expanded the sidewalk for when the retail comes in to make it more pedestrian friendly. So you can envision as these are opening, these retail stores open, that people coming inside and outside. That's so essential to activate that ground plane. And that's what we're excited about with this project. Next. We did bring in the residential lobby in the same materials. So it is wrapped in wood, which makes it highly unique and consistent with the facade. The ceiling treatment is floating joists and tongue and roof cedar. The lighting is flush with the walls. Again, very important to bring the architecture, the ideas, the artistry, or the aesthetics into the building as well. Next. Roof terraces, where you can not only engage each other, but also engage people on the street. So it's very important to think of buildings as being activated vertically as well. So we think the ground plane about the pedestrian or the public space, can you take that concept and bring it vertically? And that was the key idea, in a sense, taking advantage of the step massing, which was a key issue in terms of contextual aspects, but also you can activate them. You can create these green spaces. Next. Moving up into the units, there's a mix of studios, as I mentioned, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. In order to open the units as much as possible, we did allow these windows to flush floor and ceiling. Very important. It's also 9.5 feet tall ceilings. So there's a generosity in proportions, which is one of the key things you can bring to these type of projects. And also we oriented the bathrooms and kitchens against the corridor walls as a way to open up the living room and bedrooms and main living spaces. So there's a way of laying this out so you take most advantage of the views for the public space, and then you push the density of the kind of core towards the center space where it's not as essential to have light. Next. And here again, you see the bathrooms, you see the bedroom as discussed, and you can see from looking from the kitchen here, you can see outside, and in fact, you can see the balconies from, of course, the building across the street that Betsy was talking about. So it's also connective horizontally as well from building to building, very crucial in these type of projects as well. Next. And here's just a pull out. So we believe that Brush Park can be a case study. I think Maurice also touched upon this. For forging new paths, not only with regards to Detroit, but Los Angeles. We can learn a lot from this whole project. So very excited to be part of it. And I do believe that this type of approach inspires communities and brings new cities to life. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lorkhan. And there were some exquisite photos in there where you could really see how each of these buildings start to relate to one another, whether it's through the windows of the building that Lorkhan just described into the building that Betsy described, and how it starts to create a sense of community even when you're inside your new home. So next we have our last panelist. This is Andrew Bodley. He, like I said, he worked exhaustively on this project while at Hamilton Anderson Associates, and then when it shifted into the construction phase, he said, I'm going to follow this project, and shifted over to Bedrock. He has followed it all the way through, and will continue following it all the way through the leasing aspects. And with that, I'm going to ask Andrew to talk about his role at Hamilton Anderson in designing this project.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks everyone else for joining tonight. This project's been a pretty major part of my life over the last 5 years, so it's kind of it's a big honor to be talking about it with you all tonight. So we're looking here. This is 440 Alfred. Kind of serves as home base for the development and all the rental properties at City Modern. It's 180,000 square feet, 74 residential units with a mix of studio through 3-bedroom units with multiple 2-story units as well. The building houses all the common amenities, leasing and property management, and nearly 130 private parking spaces underground. The site, as you see, takes up almost half this block with Alfred Street to the north, Brush Street to the west, and Division Street to the south. Having such a deep site allowed us the opportunity to kind of wrap the perimeter of the site with units and create a raised courtyard for residential use in the center, while also capturing views of downtown and the entirety of the City Modern development. So some really pretty beautiful views. Next, please. So here's a little video of the exterior, if you could play this. We'll talk a little bit about the exterior and the building's massing. It was established with 2 major goals in mind. One, to allow more sunlight into the courtyard, so by reducing the height of the building along the south and west, and also to break down the building scale at the primary retail areas to kind of maintain street level connectivity. That's something that, as Maurice and Betsy and Lorkhan all talked about, was really elemental in my mind in the success of this project is the connection to the street and maintaining a neighborhood feel, even with buildings that may have a larger kind of scale, especially with it being also a historic neighborhood. Next, please. So this is an overall elevation from Alfred, the corner of Alfred and Brush. Each residence has either a Juliet balcony or a full balcony. The balconies shift kind of along the elevation to provide more visual interest and minimize the often stacking effect of balconies on top of each other. Large portions of the bronze metal panels were also added to bring visual interest as you move around the building. The mass also you see here at the street level. This is Brush Street. You also see it along the left side of this image on Alfred. Steps down to kind of heighten the feel, make it a bit more intimate feel along the retail corridor. Next slide, please. So to counter these really large kind of facade elevations, we tried to bring touches of subtle variation in the materials and shifting patterns which are created by window openings and kind of the vertical panel joints. So these panels shift and restart at each floor level, separated by a single horizontal joint, both in the metal panel and in these white concrete panels. Speaking of the white concrete panels, these are all one material, but have a little bit different finish to them. So one is, some of the panels are sandblasted and some have kind of a exposed aggregate texture. So you can see the slight variation between those two things. The windows toggle between clear and translucent throughout the facade, both to serve as privacy in bedrooms and closets, but also to transform the exterior facade at night with kind of subtle glowing elements. Next slide, please. This is just another overall view showing shifting patterns, kind of the window alignments and some examples of the balconies. Next slide. So now we'll go inside the building to the lobby. This is located directly off of Alfred. Includes access to the property management office and leasing, the package room and dry cleaning, which are amenities in this space, as well as a fitness center, which serves all residents of City Modern. The material palette is focused on kind of simplicity and natural warmth, which is a consistent theme throughout the building's interior. Full height north-facing storefront windows provide a really ample filtered natural light to the space as well. And art and furniture, also a big theme that you'll see throughout the interior, provide more kind of lively elements of color to the otherwise kind of muted palette. Next slide. So here's a little video highlighting some of these elements. This is just of the main entrance as you enter off of Alfred there. Note our signage was done by Zoe's Creative. Did a really great job. That sign was painted, and you'll see some of these other signs here. This highlights the amenities in the building. The elevators are wrapped in a really large format travertine stone, which we thought was really beautiful. Again, bringing simplicity and kind of natural elements to the building, which are somewhat counter to the exterior of a very kind of white and black modern facade. Next slide. So we'll talk about some of the building's amenity spaces. Again, these are all available to the residents of City Modern's rental properties. Here's a quick view of the fitness center, which is also adjacent to the lobby and directly off of Alfred. Next slide. Now we'll move up to the second floor amenity space. This is the main community space featuring a lounge, cafe area with kitchenette, flexible kind of dining and conference room and game room equipped with a really great shuffleboard table. Next slide. Another one there. There's the shuffleboard table. Next slide, please. Here's a video. So designed as the building's primary social space, the community room has direct access to the exterior courtyard. Again, the material palette and furniture add a lot of color and to the natural wood and concrete palette. Kudos here to the Bedrock design team and Pop House for putting together a really amazing furniture package. You'll also notice a presence of art in a lot of these spaces. It was really important here and in a lot of our Bedrock properties that local artists are showcased. And I think our team did a fantastic job in the curation and selection of these pieces, not just as accents, but to me, they become a real part of the building's design. I'll let this finish out. Okay, so now we'll go into the unit. This is our model unit, staged unit for the building, which I feel represents a really good majority of the design strategy for each of these units. Units range from 450 to 1,600 square feet, again, studio through 3-bedroom. We design these units as a long, shallow footprint with the utilities, bathrooms, and kitchens along the core or along the corridors to really allow for natural daylight in the living and bedroom spaces along the exterior walls. See some of the interior finishes here. Next slide, please. And we've got another video. Again, the warmer kind of natural material palette. We really liked the selections on the exterior, but felt it was more appropriate to do something a bit more kind of warm and homely feeling with, again, more of a natural feel. Ample windows, floor to ceiling. Some of them span 8 feet wide in some cases. Really highlight great views of the courtyard, as you see in this video. Downtown when you start to look south, and to the north and west, as I mentioned before. Maybe some of the best views actually overlook the rest of the city modern development. I don't know how much time is left in this video, but we'll let it run and go to the next slide. Beautiful bathrooms, of course. Okay, so now to the courtyard. So this was kind of the main, I like to call it the highlight of the building. There were two overarching goals for the design of the courtyard. One was to enhance the building's connection to the street. As you see, there's kind of a primary stair that leads you directly to Brush Street. And kind of the rest of the surrounding neighborhood. And the second goal was to create a feeling of kind of separate but connected spaces through the use of trees, material variation, and ground vegetation. A couple other features. Each unit at the courtyard level has a semi-private patio. There's also a built-in grill station, a large picnic/dining table, and a fire pit. Another thing too, you can go to the next slide. Just some examples here of the material palette. This is all done and complete. I think it turned out very well. And next slide. Another feature I think that was important was the acoustics. So this being a number of units facing this space, acoustics and privacy were kind of an issue. So we used over 40 trees and planters, a number of long grasses and green roof, varying in species and density and foliage. If we were able, in my mind, if we were able to provide residents the option to be social or to sit and gain kind of a moment of serenity in this space, then I think we would call this a success. And I really hope when this building opens, the people who live there find that to be the case as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Andrew. As you said, it was the highlight of the project. The Courtyard Terrace is probably one of the most beautiful terraces I've seen. And what's really nice about this project is that each of these buildings, as shown by all the architects this evening, features some sort of outdoor terrace for the residents. But all of those terraces are also lined up with view corridors to the other terraces and nearby buildings, so that you start to get a sense of community even when you're outside on the terraces and watching either downtown and the activities downtown like fireworks, or watching rooftop activations nearby. So there's a lot of ways in which all of these buildings across the project are connected together. We talked about views from one window to another, from one balcony to another, from one terrace to another, the porch settings, the streetscapes. It's just a really thoughtfully done, integrated project. And that's thanks to all the people who have worked on this project featured on this panel, and those that aren't on the panel that are other architects as part of this project, like Studio Dwell and Merge Architects. So we want to thank everyone for doing their best work for this project. So we do have a few minutes for questions, and I'm going to start by answering everyone's most frequently asked question, which is about parking, because it is Detroit after all. So everyone wants to know about parking. So I'll start, but then by answering how we strategically design parking throughout the project, which is a series of underground parking levels in 2 of the buildings, the one that Betsy spoke about, 124 Alfred, and the one that Andrew Bodley just spoke about just now. We also have a series of tucked away surface parking lots, and then of course surface parking. And I want to ask Maurice, talk to me about how difficult it can be for community planning to integrate parking in the city of Detroit, and not just in the city of Detroit, but other cities as well. What lessons have you learned from this project, and what have you started taking away to other cities?
You want me to start?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. Well, I think this has been an amazing proof of concept that you can accommodate cars for a fairly dense block and a half without a massive parking lot. And you know, there are other examples that we now have to live with in Detroit, like the development on the riverfront that has a rather large internal parking court. And as a result of going to that formula of concentrating all the parking in one single spot, everyone comes and goes from the inside of the block. And as a result, you never see anyone leaving from their front door. And so I thought the beauty of this was that there wasn't one way of parking City Modern. You had at least 3 to 4 different ways of parking, from one floor underground to tuck under on the unit. And instead of one massive parking lot, you have parking pods that are interspersed to the point where you can't even see it. So effectively, you have parked to a high ratio, but there was an early decision that we will not see a parking lot. And it worked. I think it worked.
Betsy, do you want to weigh in, or Andrew, do you want to weigh in on how you hid underground parking into the design of your projects, so that the nearby neighbors wouldn't be facing obtrusive sort of parking lots and or parking pathways?
I can start quickly and let Andrew jump in, because he had more parking than I had to worry about. Yeah, as I noted, some of it's underground on the entire block of that building at A3, with a sort of a hidden ramp from the alley. And then there's also tuck under parking and surface parking right on grade, again, wrapped by a building to make it less noticeable. So that's the A3 side of it.
Yeah, and similar strategy on 440 Alfred. There's an entrance to the grade level parking, which is actually directly under that courtyard. So on the grade level, first floor, you enter, and that's probably a bit more to the public for retail or potential future tenants. And then off of Division Street, there is a fairly small ramp entrance that takes you underground. To the 2 levels. There's actually 2 levels of parking below 440 Alfred. So I believe there's maybe 30 spaces underneath the courtyard at grade level, and then you know, the rest around 100 in the 2 levels below.
So the second most asked question about the City Modern architecture is the innovative use of materials. So while everyone wants to know, how do I park? Where do I park? I want to live here. What do I do? They also want to know about the use of materials and the callback, as Lorkhan said, to historic materials that were used throughout Detroit and then incorporated into this modern architecture. So Lorkhan, talk to me about the selection of cedar for your project, for the exterior, where that comes from, and then also talk to me about the sort of maintenance of this use of materials over time, and what you as an architect have devised in your architectural strategies for this project.
My pleasure. Interest in architect, you try to explore ideas, not only in terms of materiality or other strategies in one's work. I do like to challenge the convention in a sense that cedar is a very good material to use. It's used also in other parts of the Brush Park development, as we know, but also historically, it is a material that has been used. So we like to look at that and pursue that idea. Now, quite obviously, with all materials, one has to maintain it. But the long-term value of cedar is extraordinary. It can last for many, many years, as we all know. You see buildings with cedar on the exterior 30, 50 years. It is a material that is used. I've always held that position. It's certainly been proven to our buildings. We use wood, certainly here in Los Angeles, and we're using wood in other projects in Detroit. And for that reason, I embrace it. It has a quality to it. I think materials can be tactile. They can be interesting. There's a warmth in it. And that's why we use it. But as you mentioned, Melissa, we also look at, as you say, the contextual materials that have used historically. The other building is brick. We also have a metal building as well. So I do think that as an architect, one has to bring to the table ideas that perhaps are somewhat unexpected, but with research, when you bring those other aspects of research into projects, and you can understand, and you can explain that the lifespan of cedar is great. It's just, it has to be maintained, but on television, all materials are. But to me, it makes sense. It's a good material. I don't know if that...
It does. It answers the questions perfectly. I'm actually wondering, Mona, what you think of, as a community member and a community advocate, what you think of the use of materials placed in all of these that are coming up next to your home. What do you think of the use of materials, and do you think it harkens back to a historic brush park? Mona, we may have to ask you to unmute for just a moment.
Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you, Mona.
I'm sorry. All the materials that were put into the projects were brought to the community for their input. And there were different types of comments on them. Because we have such a diverse community of young and old, it was more of the youth that was excited, especially about this particular project with the cedar. So we took in consideration everyone's opinion. I particularly liked the brick, and then there were others who liked the steel and the metals. So it was everyone's input in regards to what they particularly liked, but they all liked the designs of the project. And we really didn't have any negative feedback on any of them.
Perfect. Thank you, Mona. Just proving that because we used 5 different architects, and because we used 5 different architectural aesthetics and material palettes, there's something for everyone here. And we're not going to please everyone with everything, but we at least have diversity within the development. So that's great. We have time for one more question. So I'm going to ask this towards both Mona and Maurice. You know, this is what we felt was a very Detroit specific project, grounded in the historic aspects of this neighborhood and what the community was requesting. But we also understand that this as a process, as a model, could be duplicated into other cities. So Mona, how would you feel if this type of project and this process were duplicated into other cities? And Maurice, are you trying to duplicate this into Chicago right now? Tell us the truth.
Well, I think that it can be duplicated. Brush Park was quite a desolated area with some historical still in place, but the need for change, it would cost too much money to totally, you know, build historical homes here. And I think that when I met the Bedrock group and the ideas that they had, or the vision that they had, I could actually see it, although they were probably the only ones that didn't come in with pictures. So they were presenting an image of what was to come, and it was going to have a more of a collective feel to it. I'm a visionary. I could actually walk with them with that, and I could see it. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but I just knew it was going to be really nice. Then when they came in and they would meet with us and match some of the colors and the bricks and some of the other aesthetics that were currently already on the buildings, the vision was coming together little by little, and we walked through it. So I guess in short, I would have to say, I would think that for sure that this can be duplicated with the right team, with communication with the community, with communication with the city. I had written down earlier that, you know, a village is put together so that a child could be developed, but this village was put together by a group of architects and community, and it's actually turning out to be quite a wonderful place to live. Can you follow me on that one?
I can. I don't know.
I get a little emotional every now and then, and my poetry might be a little different, but the answer to your question is yes.
I'm just
Great to hear.
If Maurice can follow that answer.
Help me out there, Maurice.
I just you know, to try to find community members who define themselves as a visionary. I just love that. That she was able to see the future, because usually that's like the superpower of architects, to be able to see the future. But I think that her testament to being able to walk this journey and see it with us is part of what is difficult to replicate, okay? The process, I think can, and what I say, the process, this is a place-based strategy. So if you were to try to replicate this again, you had better first understand the nature of the place, understand what's unique about it, what will generate a response that is of that place. So for example, the lot sizes of Brush Park are fairly unique. I mean, they're 50 feet wide. City Modern had to try to figure out, how do you put a building of mass, a similar mass and stature next to an historic mansion that used to be a single family house? Well, the answer wasn't to try to reproduce a single family house. It was to create a quadruplex that had the same massing and the same approach to the street as its neighbor. So I think that if you're willing to riff off of the character of those places, yes, this is replicable. I think the issue about character is really key. So my question is, will the next block and a half of Brush Park learn from the lessons of City Modern and allow City Modern to now define the character of the neighborhood as it moves forward? And that is so important, because part of what made Brush Park so special was the variety of houses and densities that were there, but there was a cohesion, right? And I think now City Modern has laid the template with the same variety and cohesion in a contemporary, forward-looking language. That's now the design code, as far as I'm concerned, for the next neighborhood. And so there's a lot about this that is I'm carrying with me to Chicago. I've already identified where I'm going to attempt what was done in Brush Park. It's called Woodlawn, and it's the neighborhood that will spring up around the Obama Presidential Center. So I can tell you the lessons of Brush Park follow me, as does the lessons of Detroit. As I said, most of this country has something to learn from the Motor City.
Well, with that, I just want to thank everyone on the panel tonight. Thank you for your passion and your dedication over multiple years for this project. And it's not over yet. It's only a little bit over halfway complete for the full 8.4 acres. So we'll do a follow-up panel on this next year, and we'll talk about the other buildings and projects that we didn't talk about tonight. And with that, I hope everyone enjoyed your evening muse. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening and enjoy this last few days of summer before fall hits. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night. We'll talk soon.